to the cloud. Hello. Welcome to this session of DataManagementU.com's webinar series. I am Anne-Marie Smith, and I am the executive editor of DataManagementU.com, which is, as everybody probably knows, hang on as I start the slideshow, the premier place for everything to do about enterprise data management, including data strategy, data governance, and today, all about how data management can adopt and adapt the Agile mindset. I'd like to cover a few housekeeping points. As I just mentioned, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A section. I will monitor the Q&A section fairly closely. We'll monitor chat, but a little less closely, so questions should go in Q&A. Data management education, online, on-demand courses in various aspects of enterprise data management. If you're interested in more in-depth study, please go to datamanagementeducation.com. If you're on social media, follow Data Management U. We love to interact with people in the profession, and that's one way we engage with them. This session's being streamed live on YouTube. It will be recorded and placed on YouTube in about a day or so, depending upon technical resources. The presentation Mike will give is available on our webinar website. And if you stay for the entire session, you will earn a certificate that awards one professional development unit so that you can apply it to various certifications. The certificates will go out in about a week to 10 days. So when you don't get it tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. US Eastern Time, please don't let me know because it hasn't gone out yet. Thank you to our partner organizations and our sponsors. They make this possible. And we are grateful for each and every one of them. And we hope that if you represent an organization like IDMA, the Insurance Data Management Organization, IIBA, the Business Analyst Organization, IIM, which is the Information Institute, and if you are a member of a company that would like to sponsor EWSolutions, Data Management U programs, please don't hesitate to let me know. Today's session. Today, we're talking about the Agile mindset, which, as you'll see, is truly essential for 21st century success in every area of business and even in non-business areas. So what's Mike going to talk about today? He's going to talk about, in brief, the Agile methodology and how some misconceptions of Agile contribute to an ineffective application of Agile methods. He'll spend a fair amount of time on how organizations use Agile effectively and talk about the value of adopting a best practices-based Agile approach to a variety of business situations, including enterprise data management. So, who is our speaker? Mike Palladino, a dear friend, colleague, and expert in Agile methodology, is also a member of the DataManagementU.com Thought Leaders Collection. As you can see from the bio on the screen, Mike has a wealth of experience, and he's also an instructor at Villanova University. Since I am a graduate of one of Villanova's big local Philadelphia rivals, LaSalle, I say that, and I'm not going to hiss. Surprise.
Well, my wife did go to LaSalle, so there's
yes,
a little tension in the house.
Yes. I'm going to let Mike take this away. I'll stop my screen sharing. Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. We'll take a quick moment to switch over this sharing. And let's see, I think we're good. I think we are ready to go. All right, so hi all. So today, as Anne-Marie said, I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through Agile. This is not a tutorial on how to use Agile, but it's more talking about the different elements of what Agile is and how it can be applied, and some of the things that I've done in my company and other companies that I've worked for. So go through a little bit of an overview, talk about the concepts such as business agility, changes, and also how do we help adults learn these techniques? I think we have to take a different approach than we've typically done for teaching and training adults. The very simple high-level understanding of Agile, it's really just a set of techniques, set of tools to help get work done. That's it. It's not a big magical surprise or statement. It talks about ways that teams can come together and work together. And what I love about it is it's much more empowering in terms of the teams start defining the way that they work together. And what it does is it allows them to optimize themselves much more than trying to apply a standard approach or a standard technique. And I've had people come back later on and say, now that I've switched to Agile, I can't go back. Please don't make me go back. It's much more fun to work this way. And that energy, that motivation, it just infuses the company. And I just love how people really seem to adapt to it. I also wanted to start out very early, just talking about some of the successes I've seen and some of the quotes that we've had just within the last 2 to 3 years. We typically show anywhere from 25% faster. One case, we were 60% faster for a $120 million US project. Some countries, we were taking 11 months to roll out a solution. And when we switched to Agile, all of a sudden it was taking a little over 3 months, dramatically different in terms of how we were implementing previously. So just some great feedback, great work, great solutions. It does work. It's not a theory. Maybe 10 years ago, there was still a question of does it work? I think the data is there. It does work if applied appropriately. But to put Agile in context, I think it helps to go back a little bit and talk about what am I comparing it to and how does that fit in and where did Agile really come from? Part of the background, the traditional way that we worked is typically called waterfall or sometimes called traditional. It's where we do that plan, build, test, release. Again, I'm primarily a software background, but I'm going to expand this later on. And the waterfall comes from, we start with requirements, go into design, go into implementation, verification, maintenance. There's several different flavors of this approach, but it's typically, there's a little more handoff between these groups versus groups going all the way through these different sections. Project management itself started in construction. If we're going to create a building, we're going to create a structure, it's very hard to come back and say, you know, can we just move that pyramid over a few inches or centimeters over? I think I messed up. It's a little hard to go back and make those kinds of adjustments. So with that type of work, planning becomes such a large component and a large effort needed to make sure we understand what we're building, where we're building it, how we're building it. We don't want to create a 2-story building to find out later on it needed to be 100 stories, 100 floors. We'd have to go back and completely redo the lower structures. So that planning becomes a crucial element. Software in its early days started out in a very similar approach. Many of you may even remember the days of zeros and ones and flipping physical switches to program a computer. Later on, we had different evolutions, punch cards. I came in right after the punch cards. I didn't have to worry about dropping boxes of punch cards. And part of that evolution was moving through different types of higher and higher level languages. But at this stage, planning was still important. Today, software is much easier, changes much quicker. There's lots of elements, there's lots of components that we can go in and make those adjustments, certainly compared to some of the early days of physical switches. So let me kind of summarize that real briefly on a slide. As I mentioned, construction plan was not necessarily that much bigger than the build and execution. The build execution was a larger component, quite a lot of money to do that. Or sorry, a high cost of change, I should say. Software early days was similar, but in the modern software, that build execution is much smaller, to the point some of the planning effort could take almost as long, if not longer, than sometimes the execution itself. And that cost of change is much lower today than it had been in the past. From a speed perspective, there certainly was not a whole lot of change requests for early pyramids and buildings. Same with software, there was not a lot of major changes, but now the rate of change is much faster, the cost of change is lower, and it created a different dynamic. And that's really where a lot of the genesis of Agile started, in the software, not necessarily in other areas, but it did have a genesis in software development. So part of the challenge we run into is, in waterfall, we hear about plan everything up front, write it all down before we start. To me, Agile is much more aligned to an artistic approach. Imagine asking someone, I want you to draw or paint something for me. Before you start, you must tell me exactly what every single pixel, what the color is going to be before you start. And in some ways, we constrain our building process by doing that. Very difficult to do. Where if we tell an artist, here's the concept, we have, maybe we want trees, we want landscapes, a certain building, maybe a certain person or people. Now go create that. It's much easier to create it and then go back and say, well, here's what the actual design itself was. And that's part of that mental mind shift of Agile, is to say, we have to think about it more of, we're going to give more directional approach, not the very specific, explicit, dot by dot, bit by bit approach. And so I'm kind of starting to drill into some of these concepts. I'm being a little more theoretical at this point, but we're going to drop in a few more details. But again, think of it more as that artistic approach of, we have ideas, we're going to paint it, then we know what we've painted, but it's hard to be that precise before we actually complete that painting.
So Mike, would you
Yeah,
say
sure.
that the basic concept for Agile is it's an approach? It's not a set of step-by-step instructions, but it's more of a method of behaving that is adaptable and not necessarily prescriptive.
Exactly right. And we're going to talk a bit about that as well in some of the slides coming up, to why there's no single playbook for Agile and why we don't want to write that single playbook. So I'm going to talk more about that. Just setting some of the background here. If you're not familiar with Agile, again, I just want to touch on it lightly. Requirements take on a different shape. It's more around something called a user story, where if you're familiar with Lean Six Sigma, the voice of the customer, we're taking the approach of, well, what is the customer expecting the behavior to be, not the technical specification. Part of that writing style, those stories go into a backlog. The team decides what subset is going to go into something called a sprint, typically around 2 weeks. And what's going to happen is, in those 2 weeks, they're going to work on just that subset of work and those stories, with the goal of fully, truly completing it and rolling it out. We see a lot of this in everyday mobile devices. And of course, I hid my phone here. We get a lot of updates on our phone all the time. As part of that, you're actually seeing Agile in practice, small incremental pieces that are developed over time, and they grow, and those cumulative pieces of work come together to build that larger product. The old way, you used to see this with Microsoft. Microsoft would put out a major operating system every 3 years. All of a sudden, things would break. Companies would need massive training, very ineffective way. Where now we're seeing that incremental approach, it's easier to roll out and absorb those changes. There's some other benefits too by making this change. When we think about more of that big bang approach in waterfall, we might go deliver. We're going to start working on a project. The cost, the risk are going up. We don't know if the customer wants it. We don't know if they agree. And at the very end, we release it. We get some value to come out at the very end. Agile's mindset is to say, we're going to start in smaller increments, we're going to start delivering the most important thing first. I'll come back to that later on, but that's going to be an important theme. What's the most important things we want to deliver first? Get those into the pipeline and start delivering. Yes, some of these may be grouped up until maybe they're grouped together to be a larger release, similar to how like software processes today. But that's the idea. We want to get the more important things out and used versus waiting until everything is delivered before we roll out the important components. The other benefit is what happens if we stop early? It's good enough or we run out of budget. On our left-hand side, you see we had all this work, all of this time. We don't have anything to show for it because we took the all or nothing approach. All the pieces have to be there. If not, we can't roll it out as is. On the right side here, all of this green, this is where our customers can use our solutions before we ever get to the quote unquote final solution. If we do stop early, we have something that's functional, it's working, and it might be good enough that we can put it out there, and it may be better to move our time, our resources to something else. And perhaps we could come back to this at a later point. A few other concepts around Agile from a visibility perspective. Lots of waterfall projects. There's a lot of big kickoffs in the beginning. The team goes and works. We don't see much. And then all of a sudden at the end, there's a lot more energy spent showing what the results are. Excuse me. In Agile, because we're connecting with our customers typically every 2 weeks to show them a demonstration, that visibility is higher. We get some course correction. We get some adjustment as we go along. Adaptability. As we plan out in a more traditional project, it becomes harder to make the change. We're reluctant to make those changes. We go through a formal change process. Agile is building in the change, building in the adaptability as we go along. So there's more flexibility as the industry changes, as our customers change their mind. Change can be a good thing. It certainly is our new reality. It's a constant fixture that things are constantly changing. I showed this a little bit on the previous slide. There's business value we get sooner versus having it delivered later. And we're reducing the risk because our customers are seeing things throughout. We're not waiting until the very end to find out that, well, maybe that's not quite what they really, truly wanted. Now, I talked more about software examples. That's primarily, as I mentioned, where Agile had its genesis. But over the past, maybe 6 or 7 years now, I've started to realize at its core, Agile is much more about high-performing teams. And all of the things we see in software are more of a side effect. As software teams became faster, they needed a way to accelerate testing. That generated automated testing. As teams became faster, they needed to move software through the environments faster. That was the genesis of DevOps. So these other things that we typically associate as software are really more of that side effect or the downstream impact of teams becoming faster. So if we extract out this concept of Agile is more about teams, we can now apply it to other areas in the company that have nothing to do with software. And we're actually doing that at Bristol-Myers Squibb today. Some of the value and benefits as we start focusing a little bit different. Time to market, time to value, we're getting things out faster. Imagine if we're releasing a marketing product, releasing a drug product. By moving that to the market sooner, you get a higher time to value. Risk management, Agile has shown it increases the quality, reduces the risk. Our satisfaction to what is being delivered is higher since we're getting the faster feedback loops. We have better engagement with our employees. The cost of change is better. And it's also been shown that it's a much more predictable and stable environment. Another example of just thinking differently, and this is a different aspect of Agile, is if we take a project, one of the goals is to say, let's stop doing these big, large projects. Let's do smaller projects. Well, the one company I worked at, they said, we're going to do everything in 3-month projects, except we typically have about a 3-month ramp up to get the team started, the budget put in place. It might take a month to ramp the project down. The next project, we're going to ramp up 3 months, run the project, ramp it back down again. Well, imagine if we could keep the team together instead of constantly changing the team, keep the team together and simply change the work that that team does. We now get rid of those two middle sections. The team stays together. We can now just keep this team moving and working together. If we compare the timelines, typically the top one is 14 months, the bottom is 10 months. Let's do some quick calculations. Just this simple change allows us to go only take 71% of the original time, flip the numbers, we're about 40% faster. Think about that, a productivity increase of 40%, and all we did was change the approach of keep the team together, change the work that they're doing. So these are some of the areas where the speed comes from, and it's kind of surprising with some of the numbers. Let's take it out. Let's double the number of projects, 28 months versus 16 months, about 57% of the original time, or about 75% faster. That's pretty significant. We're going to accelerate a team 75% faster. And that's only the little piece. That's just doing this one simple piece. You may have seen or studied the Tuckman Model, or you've heard of it as forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. A team goes through these phases as they come together. So a team forms, their effectiveness goes down. As they're storming, they're figuring out how they work. Eventually, they figure out the way they're going to work and they become a high-performing team. If we tie this back to the previous slide, when every time we spin down a team and spin them back up, we have to go back through the Tuckman Model, the forming, storming, norming. If we keep the team together, all of a sudden, we're staying at the performing level. We get a productivity boost even on top of those large numbers that I showed on the previous slides. So again, it's thinking differently about how we approach work. It's just different. It's hard to describe sometimes, or sometimes it just seems so straightforward. It can't be that easy, but in fact it is. So part of an agile transformation, one of the things I always share with my coaches, I tell them, your job is not to implement agile. Sounds a little backwards. I said, your job is, how do we help teams go faster, better, quicker, higher quality, whatever it might be? We just happen to use agile techniques because we want to think about that transformation in a more broader way, more of how we're changing people, how we're changing the way they're working, how we're having cross-functional teams work better together. And it does require a culture change. It changes the way that people approach work and think differently. Thought around business agility. Some of these are.
Before you
Oh, yeah,
proceed,
sure. Yeah.
we have a question
Okay.
about keeping the team together.
Yes. Oh, yeah, I'm read it right now.
Does it mean that it depends on the capability of the team? What if it requires a different skill set?
It does. Obviously, we can't apply this 100% in all cases, but surprisingly, if someone's working on various websites, in many cases, it's easy to work on different types of websites. If we have developers in SAP, for example, well, if they're staying in that primary area, they're working with a primary client, it's easier that they're not doing a lot of context switching. I've worked in companies where they go out, they hire out to a vendor. When the project's done, all those people in that team disappear. Sometimes they go out to the same vendor and they bring in a new set of people to do very similar work, just because of the way the contracts work. So part of it is, again, getting to the team to say, whoa, let's stop. If we can keep the work defined faster, even if we can keep, say, 80% of that team together, and maybe we're supplementing with certain skills, that could be another approach, for example. And yeah, I do agree, there might be something that are just completely different. Right, in those cases, we may have to switch teams, or maybe we have two different parallel teams and they're focusing differently. So yeah, of course, there's always exceptions and adjustments to it, but conceptually, that's really what we want to try to do.
Thank you.
Sure, great question. What I keep hearing from different businesses, we want to be able to adapt quickly. We want to be behavioral central. bring in design thinking concepts, be flexible. What it does is it drives us toward a continual learning organization. And it's interesting, as I hear my leadership talk, a lot of the things they're saying really are variations of Agile, or at least what Agile can help them deliver on what the things that they're asking about. I also love and challenge our leaders, because I say this is not a team only, it's a cultural change. And what I explain to leaders, they need to change as well. They need to change being from a micromanager, allowing their teams the freedom to make decisions on their own. They have to focus more on the results, the productivity, become better communicators, help the team provide a vision. And I love describing to them where I'll say, in many cases, you allow the team to take care of the details, and it frees up the managers to take advantage and to do more higher value work. And I don't know about you, but I haven't seen too many micromanagers become promoted. I see an awful lot of people who work on higher value work. They're the ones who become promoted. So I use these to help leaders understand this can actually help them in their career and their career development as well. They're getting away from some of that detail that they really don't need to do. Let's get the team to be comfortable to be able to step in and make those decisions where they can start working again on the more strategic, more higher level elements that sometimes they just don't get to, given the time, given the work that they need to come back to the teams. In terms of techniques to help adults learn some of these ideas, we're talking about people change management. One of the most difficult things to do. We need you to change the way you think. The way you've been doing things, we're not going to keep doing it the same way. What a foreign concept. Well, of course, their response is, well, what got me here? Why would I want to change? This is what helped me get to this particular position. So part of what my job is, how do I bring these ideas? How do I help people learn them in a very simple way so that it sticks? We talk about organizational stickiness. When I go away, are they still going to practice this? Or are they only doing it because it's the flavor of the day, the flavor of the year? So part of what I believe is that experiential learning is such a large component for adult learning. That's going to help them retain that information, pick it up faster, and do better. Think about even as children, how did we learn? Did we sit around and just read all day and that's all we ever did? Or did we really learn by doing, getting our hands dirty, getting out there and getting involved? Think about when you learned to walk. When you were 1 year old, did you read the manual on how to walk? Or did you just try it and figure it out as you went along? What about riding a bicycle? Typically, someone helped you hold it, but you just got on there and rode it. Same with driving a car. I never read a book that said, oh, turn the steering wheel 14.2 degrees, give me 12 foot-pounds of pressure on the gas pedal, and we're going to time it this way. We don't think in those terms. We get in, we learn, we have someone guide us and help us get through that process. So I equate this thinking in a very similar way, and back to what you brought up earlier, Anne-Marie, is why can't you just give me the playbook for Agile? Why can't you just tell me step by step what to do? And I associate it to university. So we've all been to university, theoretically. We all have a shared experience. Yeah, we know what university, college is compared to other ways of learning. But the funny thing is, if I talk to everyone and broke it down, we each have a different experience. We've been to a large school, small school, public school, private school, in the city, in the country, different countries, different languages, different degrees, different activities. We've all taken a different journey, but yet collectively, we still call it a shared university experience. We know what that is. Now, my daughter, a few years ago, she said, Dad, I'm going to university. Tell me what to do every single day for the next 4 years so I can pass college. Well, I don't know about you, but I can't write that 1,000-page document telling her what to do. Her experience is going to be so much more different than mine. But what can I do? If I focus on values and principles, then I can help her navigate her experience. What are they for the university? Go to class, talk to your professor, study, do the homework, take the test, pay your bills. Don't stay out too late. Don't drink too much. Stay away from drugs. Get involved in activities. For the most part, she'll probably do okay. So also in university, we don't have to follow all of those principles, but the more that we follow them, the easier it becomes. It's making it easier for us to be able to do that. So when people ask me, where's that playbook? This is what I always refer back to. And that's what a lot of the coaching in Agile is we're going to help people understand these ideas. So what I've done is internally, I realized I said, we retain about 10% of what we read, 15% of what we read and see. But when we start doing things, we retain more like 80% of what we do and what we touch with. So to help that information stick, what I've done is I've taken the equivalent of experiencing 8 weeks worth of Agile, and I've shrunk it down to a 4-hour workshop. Very condensed. I like doing it that way. I bring people into an environment. They're going to experiment. It's 90% hands-on. It's visual, and they get to play. But as part of that play, they're experiencing the processes of Agile to learn them indirectly. I give them a scenario. I said, we're going to go ahead. We're going to build a tropical resort on an island somewhere. They're going to self-select their teams. And I love arguing with people. I did this for a manufacturing group. And they said, oh, we need a piece of paper. We have to define who's going to be on what team. I said, no, you don't. There's the 4 sections. Everyone just go pick a section, look at the numbers, balance the numbers yourself. You can do this. You're adults. We're paying you to be here. I think you can figure out how to adjust your own team. And they do. I've done this for about, I think I've run the course 130 times, 1,500 people in 16 countries. It works in all these different locations. They self-select their teams. We simulate 3 cycles of going through Agile, and we get to do it with Lego bricks. And they have a lot of fun building these structures with Lego bricks. Some haven't touched Lego bricks in quite a while. Of course, I have to set expectations about learning. That's part of the learning process. It's hands-on, highly participative. They can't hide. They have to get involved. There is going to be failure. Not everything's going to work right. You're going to learn in the failure. It's not always going to be complete information. We're going to have things that are going to disrupt what you're doing. And as I explained to my type A's in the room, deep breath, it's okay. It's controlled chaos, but you'll get through it. We'll help you. You'll survive. It's a different way of working, but we want you to experience that frustration in the beginning, but then the teams start coming together and morphing together. Part of what we ask them to do is they start with the map, 3 different land masses here, and they only touch the Lego bricks for 30 minutes. And this is what they create in only 30 minutes. I've had teams come back and they say, if you gave us the entire 4 hours, we'd still be in planning mode. But yet this team built this island and resorts and bridges and all these other elements in only 30 minutes of touching Lego bricks. And they're astounded. They're astounded they were able to come together, brand new team, storming, forming, norming, the whole bit, 3 cycles, and this is what they produce.
Mike.
Yes.
Hi. I have a question.
Sure.
And I'm going to ask you to answer it in an Agile method, because we did not rehearse this. How would you adapt this to forming a program such as data governance or data quality improvement, where there are people from various disciplines, including data management professionals, who are suddenly part of a team to do this in an organization? Traditionally, you would see a team formed, they identify a leader, they come up with some principles, they come up with some goals, they come up with some policies and standards, maybe some metrics for data quality, maybe some metrics for data governance, etc. That takes a while.
It does, yeah.
So can we use that as an example here?
I think so. Part of what I like to do, what I like about this class I call it a workshop, so contractors are allowed to attend. Contractors are not allowed to attend a class. They are allowed to attend a workshop, and they had to play the semantic game. And what I like about this first is I show them Agile. Here's what it looks like. It has nothing to do with IT, nothing to do with work. It's more abstract, but most people understand travel. So when they go through and they learn the concepts and they understand sprints and the feedback loop and the retrospectives and all the different elements, I love it because they come out of the class, they go, I know exactly where I can apply that next. And sometimes people come back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later, and they say, I finally know where I can apply it. I can apply it to my operating team. I can apply it to this data management team. I can apply it to the way our organizational structure is built. So from an education point of view, I'm not trying to come in and say, I'm the expert in your space. I'm going to be able to tell you exactly how to apply it. It's pretty naive of me to go to manufacturing, commercial, data management, all these organizations and be the expert in every single possible job out there. So I've reversed it where I've created a pull mechanism. Let me show you what it is, experience it, and then the people that are in that space are actually going to come up with the ideas themselves. And then what I do is I have my coaches come in and they help them. They work through the process. They're more in that coaching mode, facilitation mode versus dictating mode. And they'll say, well, maybe we want to accelerate the way we make decisions. Great. Let's talk about maybe a Kanban type of an approach. We're storing our ideas. We're making decisions. We're going to meet regularly. Let's build some of these behaviors in there. Therefore, we can make decisions faster in data management. We've done this with teams similar to data management, where we were trying to create a system that our scientists could find databases, bring them in much faster. Then we had to run through legal and procurement. So we created a way to accelerate that process. And we had legal professional folks, we've had procurement folks that were overworked, overwhelmed, didn't want to come to the meetings. When we switched them to working this more agile cycle of working, we are now like in that whole department, this is the team everyone talks about and they want to be part of now. It's fun, it's productive, they get things done, they're not spending a lot of time. It changes their behavior. So it's hard for me to say precisely exactly how to apply it, but I've seen very similar groups and organizations apply these techniques and they start making much more rapid decisions. They get better buy-in and they get much more commitment to the folks who are involved.
What would be the one or two biggest points that you would see in common from all these different teams, Michael, that you have coached and advised? What was the common thread across operations management, data management, legal, et cetera, that helped them?
Sure. I'm going to answer it different than you might expect. I would say the common thread that I found is people seem to know what they need to do. They seem to have a lot of opinions, but what the sense is their management doesn't allow them to take the risk and try something. And I do this in one of my classes. I said, imagine a small child. They're just starting to walk. They're holding your finger. They're just about ready to take their first step. They finally take their first step and they fall down. And what does the parent do? Bad child. What a stupid child. I can't believe you fell down. Why'd you do that? I'll do that myself. Sometimes our leaders do that to us. We have a lot of verbiage. Oh, go out, take risks, speak up more, try things. And as soon as someone does it, they get their hand slapped. So part of it is helping people feel comfortable making the decisions, helping leaders to not react when something doesn't work perfectly the first time. They're the two common threads. If we fix those two behaviors, it allows the team to be more comfortable to experiment, try new things, and see what works. If I ever want to get a change across, think about it this way. Anne-Marie, you're my boss. I come to you and say, I want to completely change the way we do this process. I want to change it for the whole company, and I want to just go do it in 2 weeks. Your answer is probably no way. You're crazy. We need a committee. We've got to think about it. We have to analyze it. 6 months later, we're still talking about it. But what if I come to you and say, Anne-Marie, for this one project, I'd like to try an experiment. I like to try changing this one piece of the process just for the next 2 weeks. And then we get together and we're going to look at it. Did it work or did it not work? If it worked, can we do more of it? Can we try some other things? If it doesn't work, we roll it back within 2 weeks. What do you think? It's much easier for a manager to say, all right, I'm willing to try an experiment in a low risk environment. If it's successful, let's try it on another team. Let's try it over here. Now that we've seen some successes, hey, Anne-Marie, maybe this is something we can now apply to all of our teams. What do you think? Much easier way to get through that change curve than trying to come in with the big upfront, do it all at one shot.
Okay.
Cool.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good
Thank you
question.
for letting me hijack your exam.
No, not a problem. I just have a few more slides. I'm actually almost done here. So the one stat I was joking about right before we started is that 80% number. 80% of features in the cloud solutions are rarely or never used. Standish did a study in 2003, and they found that 45% of software is never, ever used.
Yes.
All right, so what? Big deal. You see the numbers. But now let's put it in perspective. That means we're going to plan, design, build, test, budget for 80% of something we're rarely or never going to use. It's crazy. So how do we change that thinking to where we're only going to focus on what's the most important thing first, kind of get it started? Remember that curve I showed, the green curve, get the most important things. And at some point we realize this is good enough. And it's usually around that 15 to 20% of what we thought we were going to build. Because when we build these big monolithic systems, squeeze it in there, get it in there. Think of our government's budgeting process. Put all of this extra stuff in there because we'll never get it in again. So it bloats. But instead, if we streamline it, build the most important thing, see how it looks, get feedback, try it again, and grow it, we're going to converge much, much faster. I actually have my next slides here. We'll talk about that. I mentioned teams will say that they built more in 30 minutes than they do in 4 hours. We don't even tell them to build bridges between the land masses. They figure it out. They add these requirements as they go along. They learn concepts such as a minimal viable product. Build just enough to match the solution. Don't overbuild it. Another quick way of demonstrating this is when you talk about, here's what our customers want, this is desired. If there's any misunderstandings in the beginning, we actually have a pretty wide gap at the end. Those small changes and differences lead to that problem. Agile, as I mentioned, we're going to do a checkpoint every 2 weeks to say, well, are we on track? Are we moving in the direction? What adjustments do we make? We still may not get to the desired, but we're going to be an awful lot closer because we're constantly making those course corrections. What if our customer says, we want to change our mind as we go along? Not a problem. Because with Agile, we're constantly looking and changing and inflecting. We're going to pick up those changes. And again, we're going to be much closer to what that new desired state is versus had we simply followed the plan. So we're incorporating change management into that process. So budgeting becomes a little bit easier with Agile because we're looking at dedicated teams with burn rates. All of a sudden, the budgeting process gets much simpler. Teams also learn we don't need to focus as much on contracts. Let's focus on interacting with people. I love when I run this workshop for 40 people, we build 5 teams. All 5 teams work slightly different. Think back to my university example. They're all working slightly different, but yet somehow they still work. The 5 teams mesh together for the overall program. They still come up with an amazing solution that's much, much faster than they've ever done in the past. It works. We're letting those teams optimize themselves to which way they want to work to form that larger overall team. So I purposely waited till the end to show you some of the Agile Manifesto and the principles. I'm going to just touch on them lightly. You do have the slides if you want to see these later, or easy enough to find online. Individuals and interactions over process and tools. Yes, we need process and tools, but let's make sure we're talking to each other, we're interacting with each other, we're having those phone calls. Does the solution actually work? What a concept. I mean, I remember the day in project management, if you delivered on time, on budget, that was considered a success, even if the customer hated your solution. It's like, I think we're missing something here. Is it working? Is it what our customer wants? Yes, we need documentation. Yes, it's part of the process, but let's make sure it's working in the first case. Working with our customers, actually interacting with them, what a concept, versus always going back to a contract. And as you saw, responding to that change versus simply following a plan. Agile breaks down into principles. A lot of these you'll recognize what I mentioned already today. Let's satisfy our customer. Are they happy with what we're doing? Let's look at our progress through what we're actually producing. Can we cut out waste? Keep it simple. Agile is based on Lean Six Sigma. What are some of the waste steps that we can pull out that we don't need? Do we really need those meetings? We're changing the way that we're interacting with each other. Therefore, we need less meetings. We need less status reporting. We're freeing up more time to get work done. We're allowing the teams to optimize to their optimal way of working. Every team is going to be made up of different people, different backgrounds, different nationalities, different family life issues. Let them figure out what's optimal for them. The worst thing I can do is come in and say, here's the Mike Palladino way or the BMS way of working. You must do it my way. They're never going to be optimal. I'm going to allow them to organize and be more optimal themselves. And to me, one of the most important elements of Agile is this regularly reflect and improve, something we call a retrospective. It's where we allow teams, don't talk about the work, don't talk about the product, talk about yourselves. How can we as a team change the way that we're working to be more efficient? Amazing, amazing feedback loop. I love it because I get a chance to teach my coaches how to work better. That's part of the challenge I have, is I can use these kinds of techniques to train the coaches, work with different people, learn how to be more Socratic. Don't always give the answer, help them figure out how to come up with the answer. I need to change a culture, not simply give someone an answer. And it also helps the teams and the coaches recognize body language. What's happening? Where the frustration? What's the tone, the volume of the room? What are some of those softer signals that maybe there's a problem or maybe there's not a problem? So to wrap up from a conclusion here, the last two slides, it's a mindset. It's about being flexible. It's about getting people engaged, having fun. What a concept. We're going to have fun at work. We can't say that word. We are now. You're certainly seeing that an awful lot more in the industry. Let's relax. Let people have fun. They're going to bring their creative brain to the table if they're having fun. Agile, because if we take this approach and understand Agile, we're going to see the value across the enterprise in non-software areas as well. That's what we're hoping to do in BMS, is get the position to be more associated with the chief of staff, so that we can now look at cross-organizational, cross-enterprise type of approaches. And by allowing people to experience it directly themselves, they're going to get a much more intuitive understanding. I'm not coming with the theoretical, the 1,000-page document training course. Just come in and experience it, understand it, get that intuitive sense of what it is. Now we can start the conversation. You're going to identify what's going to work in your area much better than I ever could. That's what's going to lead to the conversation, and that's what's going to lead to a very productive, fast engagement to speed up quickly. So with that, appreciate the opportunity to come to speak. Love to open up for more questions and comments. I saw a few things going on in the chat and the questions, but love to open it up and what's on your mind. And we can't hang up until I at least get two more questions or comments.
Actually, we have two questions.
Excellent.
Okay. One of them from Alla is: the Open Agile architecture is a standard published by the Open Group in September 2020. It complements TOGAF. Do you know anything about the current state of adoption of the Open Agile architecture?
I haven't been close to it. I'm just going to make a quick note here. The Open Agile architecture.
Yes.
I believe this is more software development focused. I've only touched on it briefly. So again, I don't want to try to imply I know a lot more than I do. So yeah, I haven't really seen much about it. I haven't heard much in the industry. I think it is more related to software. I have a TOGAF background as well, so it sounds like it's much more complementary to an architectural and a structure in that space. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have more information.
That's
about
fine. And the second question is from Damon about SAFE being waterfall
safe.
rather than Agile. I didn't know whether it was pronounced safe since I have no background in this.
No, that's okay. Scaled Agile Framework. If you look at scaledagileFramework.org, it's a whole, there's one of several methods on how do we scale Agile to more of an enterprise level. There's SAFe, Nexus, Less, DAD, a couple different flavors out there, a Scrum. And I apologize, what was the actual question?
The question was about what, here we go, is scaling Agile a way to reformat it as waterfall, where planning, commanding, directing is done rather than the actual Agile, which removes the value Agile can bring?
Short answer is no. It's not it has elements of waterfall. It looks like waterfall. And that's part of the challenges when you start scaling this up, there's this urge to put in more structure. But what there really is a hierarchy here. I focus a little bit more on the Agile team. Agile teams can come up to something called a program increment, which is typically about a quarter. In that meeting, you're deciding, well, what's the kinds of things that we want to work on in the next 3 months? That feeds into the sprints. But those PI planning come from the concept of a release that could be longer depending on the industry. Those releases fold up into a project or a program. The programs go up into a portfolio, which go up into a vision and a mission statement of the company. So there's still a hierarchy there. SAFe talks about how do we align all these hierarchies so that our vision mission of the company can still work its way down to what is this team doing and why is this particular work associated. A lot of companies I've seen, they follow the language of SAFe, not necessarily the formal processes. Some do with release trains. They like it. It works fine. I know Lucent does that. Other companies, they kind of conceptually and the terminology follow it, but don't necessarily put those higher structures in place. They don't necessarily need those higher structures. Some of the early part of SAFe was really meant to be, how do we get 75 to 150 teams working together, primarily on Boeing and airplanes that large. I've seen teams try to apply SAFe to 3 teams. I think it's way too much overhead. There's other techniques to handle the scale. So there's still planning in Agile. It just takes on a different form. It looks differently. It's more conceptually, and we're going to build out the details when we get to those sections, because we might go across and realize, we need to pivot and go in a new direction. We didn't waste all that time planning these other things that we may never get to. Wasted time, wasted energy, wasted effort that's going to keep us from doing this most important thing first. And that's part of that difficulty of, we've gone through measure, follow process. But what I think the industry is realizing is we might have gone too far in that direction. How do we get teams to come back a little bit, allow some of that flexibility, allow some of that gray, mushy stuff to seep back in again? It gives you that flexibility to pivot and respond quicker. And I think that's where companies and teams are seeing it, is they're getting faster output, higher quality, better results by allowing more of that flexibility in part of the process.
Mike, thank you very much. That was great. We did have a question on your favorite success story, but I think you covered part of that in your answer on SAFe.
Yep.
I would like to mention that we had a fantastically vibrant chat session going on. And I made a suggestion.
Can I share one thing real quick, Anne-Marie?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
So one of my major successes, we had $120 million, 200 people, 5 major vendors, 7 sites, 5 time zones, teams of up to 22 people, individual teams for a total of 9 teams. Massive, and it worked. We were around the clock, around this. It works in many different environments. I've done it firsthand. This project was supposed to be 2 years. We finished in 9 months. I had the senior VP come to me and say, "You're going so fast. I don't know how you're doing it. I'm afraid to do anything because I don't want to break what you're doing. You tell me when you're going to deliver, because you're going so much faster than I ever could possibly imagine." That was my my favorite success story. Back to you,
Thank
Anne-Marie.
you.
Sorry about
Wow.
that.
I have a suggestion because
Yeah.
the chat has been very vibrant. Data Management has a page on LinkedIn in the company page sections. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a post there about this webinar. I suggest that people start a discussion thread using that post as the foundation and keep this conversation going, because
Yeah,
there are
please.
lots of opportunities to explore how to adapt agile methods to the sometimes cumbersome approach companies take to enterprise data management. And I'd like to see what develops, because I think we can all learn a lot from one another. As Peter said, there aren't a lot of shared experiences. Well, there are a lot of experiences, but they aren't shared well. I think the Data Managementu's page can be a good place to start discussions and continue them like this.
Yeah,
I think it might
happy to
be an excellent
participate.
contributor.
Yep.
For specific questions, specific discussion points. I'd like to invite everyone to come back next month, last Thursday in June. We will be talking about data literacy and how it affects data analytics and data analysis. The presenter will be David Marco, president of EWSolutions and an expert in data literacy. I thank every one of you for coming today. Please, if you found this webinar to be useful, share the link. It's on the datamanagementu.com's webinars webpage. The recording will be there probably by the end of day tomorrow. The slides are there already. Thank you again. Mike, can I hold a gun to your head and ask you to come back sometime in the future for
I would
more
love to.
discussion about Agile and maybe how it really works with specific examples in areas of data management or analytics?
Yeah, happy to do that.
Great. Thank you again. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. And I appreciate the time. Have a good day.
Yep. Have a great day, all.